Hey friend, welcome back to my kitchen. Today I'm going to show you how I ferment Giardiniera. I'm going to show you two separate ways to do this just in case you don't have the same fermentation vessel as I do. I'm going to start with my Chinese pickle jar. I really love this thing. I've never had any problems with molds because it has a built-in airlock on it. And in fact, I love it so much I'm going to buy a bigger one. I'm going to start with just putting some peppercorns in the bottom of this jar. That way I'm not constantly trying to chase them down when they float to the top. Anything that floats to the top of your ferment could cause it to mold. You can make this recipe with any vegetables you like. I'm using bell pepper and a few things from the garden. I have some small radishes. I have some garlic scapes that I picked, some homegrown garlic. So I'm just going to throw these in there with the cauliflower, some onions, some jalapenos, and some carrots. Now you don't have to get fancy with this. You can mix all of these vegetables together in a bowl and then just add them into your jar. But I figure if this jar is going to be sitting on my counter for a few weeks, I want it to be really pretty. So I'm going to layer everything in. So I'm just going to start with some cauliflower. Now I did buy organic vegetables. Everything that I didn't grow myself, I bought organic from the grocery store. Because I feel like if I'm going to be fermenting something and it's going to be sitting on the counter for a while, I don't necessarily want something that might quite possibly have been touched by pesticides. So I'm just going to try to put the best quality ingredients I can into my ferment. So you'll see here I'm just adding a little bit at a time of each thing. I'll repeat this a couple of times just to get the layers in there. And I get a little extra persnickety with this because, like I said, it's going to be sitting on my counter like a work of art for a few weeks. So I use a really long chopstick here in a second to scoot things around, get them where I want them in the jar. If you are using jalapenos, you can absolutely leave the seeds in like I did. I prefer more heat, or you can de-seed them. If you don't want the jalapeno seeds, but you still want a little heat, you can always throw some red pepper flakes into the bottom of your jar before you start filling it up. When I peeled and cut my carrots, I used a crinkle cutter. You can get this on Amazon for like $4, and it just pretties it up some. Like I said, I got real fancy with it because if I'm going to be staring at it, I want it to look good. But you don't have to do that. Just peel your carrots and slice them, whatever thickness you like. And I'm going to go ahead and add some garlic scapes to this. I harvested so many garlic scapes out of my garden, it was ridiculous. And I'm going to be putting a few large bay leaves in here, and I'm going to kind of use my chopstick to get them down around the edges, just so they're not floating up, they're secure, but also, you know, like I said, it's kind of pretty that way. I did not have any fresh thyme. I would suggest that if you have fresh thyme, go ahead and pick you a couple sprigs of that and stick it down in here. The flavor is phenomenal. I'm just going to keep loading this jar until I get it all the way to the top, kind of packing it down. And once I get to the top, I'm going to show you the other way I do this. I love these jars so much. They're not expensive and you can fit a lot of stuff in them. If you do not have a fancy fermentation crock or a Chinese pickle jar or any other fermentation vessel, just use a mason jar. I happen to have a half-gallon mason jar, which was perfect for the amount of vegetables I had left. But you can do your ferments in pints or quarts, any size really, whatever suits your needs. If you just have a small amount of vegetables, do a pint size. I mean, it doesn't have to be a gigantic batch of ferment. But I'm going to load this jar up exactly the way I did the other one. The only difference being is I'm going to make sure that I pack it down super tight. This jar is not going to have an airlock on it necessarily. I'm going to be using a pickle pipe. The other one has the water around the edge of the lid to keep oxygen from coming back in. Oxygen is the enemy of your fermentation. This one is going to be relying solely on keeping all of my items pressed below liquid and allowing the jar to burp. So I'm going to use 4 quarts of water. I'm using canning salt, not iodized salt. I'm on city water, so this is bottled water. For each quart of water, you want 2 tablespoons of salt for your brine. I'm using 8 tablespoons. I won't use all of this, but that's okay. I would rather have more than I needed than come up short at the end. When you're ready to fill your jar, you just top it off. And because this has cauliflower in it, cauliflower is full of holes, it's going to hold on to air. As I just said a minute ago, air is the enemy of your ferment. Air will allow your ferment to grow mold. So I'm going to use my long chopstick and I'm just going to poke it around in here just like if we were canning, and I'm going to try to debubble this jar as best as I can. There's really no way to get all of the air out, but if you poke around enough, you can get most of it out. You can see because this jar has shoulders, the air bubbles like to get hung up on the sides. I think the shoulders are a nice feature of this jar. Listen to me trying to sell you this like it's a car. But because this jar has shoulders, it holds the food down around the edges, and you can kind of pack your food in there where it doesn't float up. And I just think that is so neat. It's basically because of the shoulders of this jar that I don't need to use a fermentation weight. None of my fermentation weights will fit down in the tiny mouth of this jar. So what I do is I keep a couple pieces of an onion. I push everything down until it's all under the brine, and then I wedge this onion under the ledge of the shoulder. And that will hold it down the entire time. Now I am going to check on this every once in a while because sometimes if there's a big enough gas bubble, it will dislodge the onion and it'll float up. But it doesn't take anything to just use a chopstick and poke it back down. Once you get everything under the brine level, you want to make sure that you skim off anything that floated to the top. And I'm not just going to skim off the seeds and the bits of cauliflower, but then I'm going to take a paper towel and I'm going to wipe the reservoir out around the mouth of the jar, just to make sure that I am not inviting anything to grow around the edge and possibly spread to the inside. You've put all this effort into making this beautiful giardiniera. Make sure you just take the extra few minutes to clean up around the top of your jar. You would be really upset to come along in a week or two and find something green and fuzzy growing inside of it that maybe you couldn't recover from. So for this particular jar, I'm just going to fill the rim up with some more of my brine, and I'm going to put the lid on, and that is going to make an airlock. When I check on it from time to time, I'll make sure that the fluid level is topped up. There's a saying that says, if the brine runs dry, your ferment will die. So keep liquid in the lid and everything should be fine. Make sure you're putting your ferment in some kind of tray because when they burp, sometimes they do overflow or splash. I'm going to do exactly the same thing with the half-gallon jar, except for this time I'm going to use a pickle puck. This is just a glass weight, and I'm going to just put it in the top of the jar and press down. This helps to force some of the air out. It pushes all the vegetables down below the brine, and anything that's going to float will float so that I can skim it off. Now you have a couple options. You can either put a regular mason jar lid on this loosely and just come by every day and make sure that you let the pressure off of it once it starts to ferment, or you can use a silicone pickle pipe, and that is what I'm using today. I'm very hands-off when it comes to stuff like this, and I really appreciate containers that kind of take care of themselves. I can just walk by, check on it, and I'm good to go. Because if it relied on me to let the gas out instead of this little pickle pipe here, which lets the gas out on its own, my jars would probably explode if I'm being completely honest. I would forget all about it. So I'm just going to put that on the top of my jar, put it in the tray with the other one, and I'm going to let these sit for a couple of weeks, and then I'm going to taste the vegetables and see if they're sour enough. If not, I'm going to let it go a couple more weeks, and it is as simple as that. Beautiful giardiniera. Super simple, completely customizable. This is also a really great way to use up some of the extra stuff you may have coming in from your garden right now that you just don't know what to do with. Just ferment it. It's delicious. But that's all I have for you this week, friends. If you're new here, hi, my name is Jen. I do cooking, canning, and food preservation videos every Tuesday and garden vlogs every Friday. If you're into that sort of content, I really hope that you'll subscribe and stick around. We'd love to have you here. Until next time, friends, happy cooking.